So today we're talking about this mural and how to go about producing a mural for a client. First of all, it takes a meeting where you show your samples from your portfolio online or physically, and then you get a notepad and pen and you take notes on what they had in mind for a mural. Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they have, most of the time they have a general idea. For instance, they want the history of the facility, or they want some buildings, or they want coffee cups and Danish cakes. It just varies quite a bit, but you take notes and you get your best impression of what they're after. So the first meeting with the director of the Gregg Historical Society was a talk where she walked me around and showed me a space where she wanted 4 different murals. And on the first one, she wanted the 1870s in Longview, Texas. Whatever that might look like. And this was for a children's area. So she was going to have chalkboards, little chalkboards to draw on, put directly in front of it with kind of a fence. And she wanted this scene from the 1870s behind that. So the wall was about 5 foot from the waist up to the ceiling was about 5 foot, and then the length on this one was 20 or 25 feet long. It's quite a long one. And the wall was Karummi. It was a wall built back in the 1870s, not that old, in the 1920s. Actually, no, it wasn't about the 1870s, because the Dalton gang robbed the bank that was in that building. So it was a really old wall. Just take it from me. It's nothing you'd want to paint on. So I suggested either canvas, a stretch on wooden boards, or just wooden boards. So she didn't care. She saw my other work and realized I could probably figure out what to do. And so she trusted me. And so I called Sunbelt Manufacturing in Gladewater, Texas, after the meeting. Well, wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself. I took notes on what she wanted. I went home and I got all these photos from the 1870s in Longview, Texas that I could find. I also went through their archives. Then I put tracing paper on top of those and traced the images off and began to shuffle it around. Now I did this in Photoshop, so I just basically did a line drawing, scanned that in, and in proportion I built a box the size of the wall that this was going to go on, and then arranged my scene, set up a meeting with the client, went back with this piece of paper taped down to a piece of foam core. I always put an overlay on it so they can't see it early when I walk in the door. If you don't cover your work when you go to visit somebody, they will accidentally start the meeting in the hallway, because they'll say, "Ooh, what you got there? Oh boy, that looks nice." And then suddenly you're showing your work in between an office somewhere. So I've just learned, keep it covered, and then when the time is right, everybody's sitting at the table and everybody's there, then you open it up and tell the story. So that's what I did on this one. It was basically a one-on-one, which is kind of rare. Usually there's more than one person in the room. But I was just sitting in her office. We laid it across her desk, and I started with the line drawing. I don't have that right here handy to show you, but she approved it with one change. She wanted a little church on the far end, and she wanted the Longview Depot, which I think I had that in the original drawing, but she had some suggestions on that. Now, when that's approved, then it's time to charge them some money. And so I invoiced her for about 3 or 4 hours on the line drawing, just to make sure she would pay. And of course, that brings up, how much is this going to cost? That usually, that almost always comes up in the second meeting. I won't answer that in the first meeting because I haven't done the line drawing. But once you do the line drawing, they say they like it, you can take a guess at how many hours it's going to take you to do. And so you look at each major thing, and for me, I look at that mule and I say, that's 8 hours. The cabin, that's 8 hours. The depot, that's 12 hours. And I get a running amount on how many hours I think it's going to take me to paint it up. Now, I've become a fast painter, so I always overestimate. But, you know, who wants to paint more than one donkey on a Saturday? So if I paint all Saturday and have a good time with that donkey, that's a good day. And so I don't want to rush it. And so just every main object, I say, takes me an 8-hour day. And then at this point in my career, I can punch out a good-looking donkey in that amount of time. But I certainly wouldn't want to do 5 or 6 objects in one day. I would be exhausted, and I wouldn't be able to do a good job. So I kind of know the rate that I paint now, and so I can estimate the hours pretty close. So I rattled through, came up with a number, and it was about $6,000 for this piece. And so I was ready for her to ask. Are you guys still with me? Somebody give me a yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I'm sitting here talking to myself. Okay, so I hope this is interesting to you. I haven't told you this story before, have I? Is this a new story?
It's new to me.
Okay, good. Good. All right. So we're to the money part. That's the fun part. So if you've worked this out in your head beforehand, then it's not hard because you can walk away from the job if they don't like it, or you can renegotiate if they have a problem with it, or whatever. So on any of these jobs, remember, you don't have to have it. If you have to have it, you can do it practically free. You know, if it was a life or death struggle, but you don't really have to have it. So that puts you in the driver's seat. You tell them what it takes to get the job. And then if they have a problem and you really want to negotiate, you can. But otherwise, you just say, well, it's not for me. Might help you find somebody, you know, that could do it, but I won't be able to do it for that amount. So in this case, I had made some kind of a comment earlier that the mural at UT Center was 10 grand. And she had said, oh, I don't have that much in the budget, but I do have 6. And I said, okay. So I think we can work with that. So she had spoken first. And by the way, on some of these kind of negotiations, he who speaks first reveals what they have. And so I could have just as easily said $2,000 on this one and maybe said okay because I really liked the subject matter. And it seemed like an open hand on this one. There was very little tight mechanical work to do on this, like you know, factories with machinery and all that. This was my cup of tea. It was historical. It was old world stuff, and I knew I was going to really enjoy it. So I wanted this one. So anyway, I rattled up the numbers, and it came out to a number that she could get, and so we were off and running. So I invoiced her for the first line drawing, and got a little bit of money from her so that I knew that she would pay. Then I was willing to wait until the job was done. No, I take that back. I went and got the supply list. So on this one, I decided to do it on wooden boards made from Sunbelt Manufacturing. So this is a company over in Gladwell that will build you anything to paint on, from canvases to wooden boards in almost any sizes. It's extremely fortunate that we have this company in our area. Again, it's called Sunbelt Manufacturing, and they've got about a dozen people in a big metal building over there punching out canvases on wooden stretcher bars all day long. And they also do silk screen printing frames, and they mount stuff for people from all over the world. They have a lot of business from China. So it's good for artists. Artists are coming and going out of there all the time. He's got one artist that lives over in Louisiana that orders about 10 large canvases, and I mean large, like 6 to 8 footers a month, that he's always shipping over to Louisiana. So it's a good company. Anyway, I go over there. I describe to them that I want these wooden boards, 5 foot tall, whatever they were, 4 foot wide. How much would they be? And so I showed him my line drawing, and in Photoshop, I had drawn the vertical lines for each panel so that these panels would cover up the windows on the wall where they were going. And so he estimated, punched it out, and he said they're 108 apiece. And so rather than thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I could buy the equipment and build those myself for half the price, I just said, fine, I want to support a vendor. I want him to stay in business. I want to help him. And the client doesn't care. And so I bought, I think it was 7 of those for $110 a piece. So goodbye, 700 bucks. But the same day I was ready to paint. Rather than being out in my garage making boards for a week. So, he really saved me a lot of problems. Plus, they make them extremely true, and so they all fit together nicely. So here you're looking at the first panel of the mule and the log cabin, and it's in my office. I set it on the counter, and it just worked out pretty nice. It was a good height, and you can see there's a stool on the right where I could climb up and paint. The next panel was pine trees and the lake. I used Synergy Park in Kilgore as reference there. I faked the log on the ground and the chopping block. So you can see how I sort of roughed that in. And there's an angle there. So 2 of those would fit together. That was important to always paint with its neighbor beside it. And so I started on the left. I slid the blank board up to it, and I matched the colors. And I went through the 7 panels that way. So here's how that one turned out. Let me back up one. So there's the rough end of the pine trees and the lake. Here's the lake and the pine trees, pretty much in their finished state. By the way, somebody asked me about green grass and a landscape, and I mentioned there's always orange in green grass. This is what I meant. There's always some dirt and yellow and orange showing through any patch of grass, and you can just scrub it in. It's more the colors than it is about blades of grass. If you're in a habit of painting blades of grass, you could be in trouble. So I scrubbed most of this in using oranges and greens. For some reason, grass is tough for young painters. I don't know why, but I just used a house paint brush and just kept rubbing on it. So now the next panel came in. Now at this point, I'm at the home studio. Can y'all see that? Somebody tell me through your microphone. Can you see the next one?
Yes.
Okay. So here I've set it up, and I what did I prop that on? Oh, that's part of it is the countertop on my library, and I may have cut a stick there to support where those 2 joined. So I made sure that they joined up nicely, and that wagon, I had to match it up just right. So the hardest part of a wagon, of course, is the ellipse on the wagon wheels. And so believe it or not, on that wagon wheel, I pulled an ellipse as big as I could in Illustrator and printed it out on a tiled 8.5 by 11 sheets, the right size, and then I traced it off. I mean, it's ridiculous to try to freehand sketch an ellipse. It's just really hard. And so I have the mechanics to do it, so I did it in Illustrator, projected it up. And those 2 ellipses are different. They were that way in the photograph. And so I realized, yeah, I've got to get that exactly right, or it's going to look like an amateur did it. And so I took the time to do that mechanically on the computer and trace it off. It probably took an hour, but then I didn't have to worry about it from that point on. I got it right. I know a Western painter in Clifton, Texas, George Hallmark, that keeps line drawings of wagon wheels on his in his studio closet because they're such a pain in the butt to do. And since he does wagons quite a bit, he just got tired of having to spend a whole day on them. And so he keeps various sizes ready to go for his next paintings. Anyway, here we've got the people in the wagon, and there's getting roughed in. Um, those bars with the gray cloth, those are used, I learned, by studying and kind of reading up on cotton farming. They're used to hold the bales of cotton in the wagon. And so that was one interesting thing. And putting a bale of cotton in this wagon was one of the requests that they made after they saw my line drawing. Oh, now there's a picture of the line drawing sitting on the chair down below. So there you go. That's part of it. Let's see what else I've got. There's a close-up of how that one's going along. I had fun painting the kids that were in there. I thought they looked like regular old boys that were having fun riding the wagon to town. So now here we are back at the office. So I'm carrying this from home up to the office, which is another reason why working on big boards is good. By the way, these boards have a 1x2 board on the edge. So they're a wooden box that's, I guess, 1.5 inches deep. And so they're sturdy and they don't warp. Okay, so now we're on to the next one. Here I'm a little working on the boys a little bit more. You see that pattern on the side of the cotton bale? That was a really nifty accident. I took a fan brush and wiggled it in wet paint all the way down. I just went left, right, you know, just in a quick swishing motion, and I got something that seemed a little bit like burlap, and I left it alone. I didn't mess with it. You know that urge you've got to keep noodling with something? That pattern was so nice and it worked so well. It was a one-stroke thing. Really, occasionally in a painting you'll come across a quick fix that works. Usually not, though. Usually you have to work on every single thing until it feels right. Now here's the line drawing that I put on the whiteboard. Now this whiteboard is gessoed first, and then I projected my line drawing up on that surface and traced it off. So there's no reason to redraw this thing. Redrawing a large painting is something that an amateur would do because they're afraid people will call them a cheater. So please, if you ever get a job like this, do not worry about projecting your line drawings or your images onto the surface. That's how you get a professional looking product. And so I had a nice line drawing that they liked, and I projected it up there. Now the other thing that I fixed there was the wheel. You can see that ellipse is just right. And so that's an Illustrator ellipse that I locked that in with. So that's a little different. But all the rest of that, and you can tell by the quality of the line that it's a projection that was traced off because the shadows have a single line on them. If a person's sketching, they usually don't sketch like that, where every little thing is geometrically pinned down. But it's extremely comforting as a painter when you've got a great line drawing sitting there, and you know it's basically a colorizing job from that point on. Okay, so here's the next one, and you can see I worked on the background trees and sky clouds first, and then it looks like I got into the ceiling or the roof line of the Longview Depot in 1870. By the way, I really like painting roofs with a maul stick because tiles, shingles, they go so fast because you use a giant ruler or a maul stick, and they just really look good. And so it's one of my favorite things to paint, actually. Now, it's hard for most people because they won't use the right tool. If you try to paint a tile roof by hand without using a straight edge, good luck. It's hard. But with a straight edge, it is just really a nifty thing to knock out. So it's something that I like to do pretty quick. So roughed in the ground there and the horse, and Paul is got his suspenders there with a handkerchief on his hip. That is actually from a photograph. I probably wouldn't have thought of that, but it was in the photograph that I found, and really liked it. Okay, moving forward. There is the wagon all noodled out with the horse, and over in the background is the Longview Depot. I had to do some research on the colors of the brick that it was made from. I think it was brick. Uh-oh, that's the painting I did that's over in the Oil Museum across the street from Fine Arts. That's Roy Laird, who was the last Kilgore mailman to be told, or he's the last mailman to ride a horse delivering mail. When the town boomed from 800 people one day to 8,000 people the next day, the postmistress told him, "You've got to learn how to drive a car and start delivering your mail in a car." And so I wondered what it was like when he had to ride his horse into town for the last time and start delivering with a car. So that was that. Anyway, I didn't mean to have that in there. There's another one. Okay, back to the mural. Here's the right side of the Longview Depot, and then the road. They wanted some roses in there, or maybe that was just me. I can't remember if that was their request or not. And then a little church. It looks a little fake, but I dropped that church in. If you look on the right-hand side, you'll see a man plowing a field there. I threw that in just for fun. It seemed to need a little detail over on the side. I should have put a dog in here somewhere, waiting for a kid to get out of the service, but I didn't get around to it. I think here's a close-up of some of the rocks. Rocks and crud in a gravel road are pretty fun to paint. You just put a shadow on them and a highlight, and basically you can just splatter, put daubs on there, and then shadow it and highlight each one of them, and it looks pretty real. Here's a close-up of the boy. I put freckles on his face. And there it is in the home studio doing some finishing touches. Here it is in the garage. It has to be varnished, so I sprayed each panel with retouch varnish, not finish varnish. Finish varnish would be too quick, and it would crack the paint underneath and the varnish surface. So retouch varnish is breathable though, and it'll give it a shine and even out all the layers. So sprayed it with retouch varnish, and it was ready to go to the facility. There's a close-up of the church. Had some trouble with that steeple because of those little gable pieces on the Gothic window up there. So that was the hardest part on that. Easiest part was putting the plank lines on the side in front of the building. I don't know that I got the gable roof on the front of the building totally centered. It seems like it's something that I should have been able to do, but I've always felt like it's a little off. But I put a hummingbird down in the lower portion. Since I like birds in general, we have a lot of hummingbirds around the house, so I dropped one of those in there. Then there I am in my fat self playing around as we mounted the mural at the museum. So they had already had another vendor from Dallas put up this wooden fence with the chalkboards. He got into a rush, and he put that up before we got our mural on the wall. Well, that was a problem because I was not about to take all that down. That guy charged her a lot of money for his work, a lot more than she paid me. He did some other things, but he was out of Dallas. He was a traveling museum specialist, and He did a little vet clinic, a little children's play area, but the bill on that was in the mid 30,000s. And so they spent a chunk of money getting that children's center done. But at any rate, to make a long story even longer, he had mounted it first, and so fortunately, we were able to slide each piece behind those chalkboards without having to disassemble all that. So there we are sliding them in. We slid the far right one in first, and then each one just slid up behind the next one, and then we fastened them with metal screws and just little pieces of hardware. We fastened them together and to have the least amount of vertical seam. So John Gooding, who some of you might know, a graphic designer in Longview who's worked with me for years, is especially good at carpentry stuff. And so I asked him to help out. And in addition, I think Lucas, my middle son, was there. There's Lucas. It was a little warm down there, so we were in t-shirts. But there we are sliding the murals into panels into place. And you can see they're covering up windows. So that's another good reason that I used wooden boards rather than canvases. And I think that is it for the show. So there you have a story about a mural created in Longview, Texas. And so I'm wondering if that brought up any questions for you. We also had a party, an unveiling party, where a lot of students and ex-friends showed up. It was just a wonderful evening. Rufus Lovett came, our photography instructor, who's retired now, and John Hillier, a retired art instructor, and Frank Herbert. So we were the original four that ran the art department here at Kilgore College. So it was nice getting together and a reunion with them. But that's my talk on how I set up the Gregg County Historical Museum mural.